David, you've been in the trenches on issues of climate, the environment, and sustainable development. You've seen a lot domestically and internationally. How do you think we're doing? What still needs to be done?
I was thinking about this on the way over. I guess if I was going to write a book about Canadian policy, Canadian climate policy, I'd call it From Hero to Zero to question mark. Brian Mulroney got this and actually was a major figure in getting climate change on the international agenda. But there then was a hiatus of a number of years in which we consistently overpromised and underdelivered, and underdelivered in a major way. And I've been arguing for years that if you do that and you're a smaller country and a medium-sized power, sooner or later you'll get to the stage where your climate policy will be determined by somebody else, by the international community. And that's essentially what happened in 2009 when Prime Minister Harper agreed to the 2030 targets with no plan to do anything about them and no real advice as to how Canada would actually operate. So into that moved, and you all know this, into that vacuum moved the provinces with some varied success. And the current government has done its best to try and stitch that together and make it look like a national scheme. The Paris conference was, I think, semi-miraculous. I don't think most of us expected much would happen. And the Canadian performance was most unusual. You had the Prime Minister and virtually every Premier all standing on the stage, holding hands and dancing together. I've never seen anything like that before. And so out of that came the Pan-Canadian climate framework. Now we'll see what happens, and we'll see how long public trust lasts in the political process. We have three of the major provinces about to have elections. It's quite likely that all three of those governments will go and will be replaced by people not in Quebec, but in Alberta and Ontario, who have no interest in this as an issue, and we'll see ourselves fighting elections on the famous job-killing carbon tax, of which there's no evidence. And I'm afraid that what's happening now is we're doing what's happening in the United States, which is politicizing an issue which shouldn't be politicized in the way it is. Climate science is clear. The issue is with us. It's worsening. There will be increased international pressure, Donald Trump notwithstanding, to ratchet up the targets agreed in Paris. That's what the agreement actually calls for. And Canada will find itself, I think, in a much more difficult position. And my guess is if we get this sort of constant succession of governments in which the Ontario government comes in and constructs a very elaborate cap and trade system, for example, and Mr. Ford comes in and demolishes it and tries to replace it with something else, I wonder what kind of public trust we're going to get in the political system when it deals with climate as an issue. And maybe Mr. Ford and Mr. Kenney will be much more pragmatic than they have indicated so far. But so far, it's going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight, and climate change, I think, will be, if not the major issue, one of the two or three major issues in each of those provinces. And I'm not necessarily going to defend the current government, but I think if we flip-flop back and forth and back and forth on an issue which is at minimum a 50, 60-year plan, or 60, 50-year issue, we're going to be in serious trouble. And we're going to get the politics dead wrong, and our political establishment will have real problems in establishing any credibility on this issue with the Canadian public. And all of Nick's surveys are showing that Canadians are genuinely concerned about this as an issue. If they begin to mistrust the capacity of policymakers to deal with it, it's going to make it much more difficult.
I think there's some really important points in there, David, notably around the potential for greater levels of polarization, not lower levels of polarization.